Further into more of this, how unstable this is. I talked about that my dad was waiting to get buried, and my mother, I didn't know it was my mother's identical twin that was. Aquí te arrastro, aquí te tiro, pinche cabrona, aquí te tiro la calles. I mean, I don't give a goddamn fuck about your life. And she was literally saying those words and talking. Frankie looked over and it was like, the hell, I don't even know you. And I think it's important because, you know, this is how unstable it is. When you find somebody who's willing to do the killings and do the harm, and they can associate within my family, you'll be able to get away and steal and take the fucking money. So then it leads eventually to the inner circle of the problems when there shouldn't have been. So I think it's important for me to talk about because Frankie did mention very lightly, and I was sitting behind him, and he goes, "Yeah, you don't know what the twin do." And my mother's identical twin goes, "Hey," and so she tried to control Frankie. She has no goddamn business to know who the fuck Frankie is. You're a total fucking stranger to my family, and you're giving orders to someone right after the cemetery of my father. That's something that I believe that was the psychologist. The psychologist probably told my mother, I think probably brought a trash bag and then put it on my front doorstep and said, "There's your dad." And my dad was my dad hadn't been buried yet, but he was dead and he was being transferred to the funeral home. So within those days, but this is when all this happened. But as far as my mother's twin threatening Frankie to say, "Keep quiet, go against him," shows the homosexuality and the lesbian that she may be that is infesting my mother even more. Because if you had a lesbian that's a sister of my mother, then my mother can't think this is all about gays and transgenders and lesbians. That is why. It's me versus them. And that's why I think that I should discuss this, because it says how potentially unstable the situation is. And the safety of my biological mother, who I was very close to, and all the things that I did and everything that happened. Because you have all this money showing up and you have these psychologists participating in this and they're not watching this. But my mother's identical twin did that. And so she's controlling Frankie. So if she can control Frankie, she can control Lupe and manipulate. This is not your fucking money. And this is not your fucking land. This has nothing to do with you. But this is how toxic the psychologists are, because they've been using my mother's identical twin to manipulate the situation. You know, my father hated Lupe. And I mean, hated Lupe. Did not like Lupe or my grandma and Ceci. Didn't like any of them. But yet they're making decisions. And so I think it's important to talk about this, because it is too late, but it's just to say even more how bad the situation is against me and how it was toward me. You know, I'm not here to do free labor, and that's exactly what I did. And it was stealing. They stole it. And since there's so many rapes, and I don't even know if Frankie ever said anything about all the rapes that had happened. I hope he did, but I don't think he did. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because I remember that. And this, you gotta understand how mad I was. And I never seen my mother's twin in a rage like this before. Which I've never seen my mother behave like this. When she gets mad, she doesn't behave that way. And so she's going after the money, and she's going after what doesn't belong to her. And she feels an entitlement that because she's related to my mother, she's an identical twin, I can steal and take everything you have and claim it for myself and just take it from your kid. Because no, I am you and you are me, and I just own everything. And you just show up in the picture. You're not a part of the suffering in my family. You're not. But she's controlling Frankie. You see now how bad this gets? Why Kenneth didn't want to say anything that your mother's an triplet or Julian's an identical twin, because let your faggots and transgenders and lesbians do whatever the fuck they want to do the harm, and then when it's time to point the finger, it's too late. So I think it's important for me to at least say that. Look at the cameras. If you find cameras and you hear the recording, Frankie will tell you as well. Hopefully Frankie will tell you. Right now, Frankie's probably an enemy of me right now, but that's exactly what happened. I saw her because I was sitting in the backyard, and she told Frankie that, don't say nothing. So it was backstabbing me from the very beginning. My father hadn't been buried yet. Now, if you want to find somebody to go give free money to, Mexican ladies that were suffering and old ladies that were really going, you could find them and give them a brand new mansion. And I guarantee you, they weren't doing anything lethal and threatening and stealing like her identical twins were doing. This is what and that's something I know the psychologist didn't do or tell her to do. But you got to understand what me and Frankie are going through. And you're just showing up in the picture. I can take and steal and manipulate anything I want, because then it's just psychologists. No, it's just this one looks like my mother. Every harm and everything that happened to my mother didn't go to me. It goes to total strangers, not me. And it's the president that's ordering this. At 18 years old, 2 years before my father died, he's showing up waving. I've already said this to several friends. So I need to say something about that. Because it's very disgusting. I'm going to CC, Barack Obama's lookalikes are showing up. And people around me scolding me and threatening me. When I get there, they're trying to justify the rapes. In every circumstances, I'm telling you, I can't even explain. I wasn't even allowed to eat at Cece's yesterday and complete my meal in any kind of comfort, because Barack Obama and his 2 daughters showed up, and they were playing psychology, and they were, basically making a mockery, because Cece's was the only restaurant I went to whenever I saw my sister who died, who was eating pizza. Remember I talked about that my sister was being fed a pizza and she was like throwing it up and shitting herself? Well, they got Barack Obama and his 2 daughters, his wife wasn't there, sit right in front of me to make sure I can see it, and he goes like this. And he's like taunting me, so he makes a mirror taunting of my worthless bitch sister who's walking up and down the street with a princess outfit shitting herself. So it's for President Barack Obama and his 2 goddamn kids. One of them is a fucking goddamn transgender. And they were doing this at Cece's. And if you don't believe me, you can go and look at the cameras and how this nigger was fucking doing this shit to me. So I wanted to say this shit because I think it's fucking important for me to talk about this, that President Barack Obama was doing this. His lookalike. They get somebody exactly like him, 2 fucking black kids, and it's, and his nigger just sitting there doing this shit to me. And he's taunting my dad's sister, because Cece's was the last restaurant I went to see my sister. And my mother was crying. And this is how this nigger is doing this, because the psychologists are ordering this. So I wanted to make this video how disgusting Barack Obama and his family is, and the psychologists and how they're persecuting and mocking the situation for their favor. Because they're the ones that were closing my bank accounts, closing my doors, and making me suffer, having people spit at me, and doing all the horrific things. While he was keeping Kenneth and Ken Cooper and Sarah Cooper as heroes and police officers. So it doesn't change that the persecution isn't going to stop, but I needed to make this video.